What is Mediterranean? A thousand things at once. It is not a landscape, but countless landscapes. It is not a sea, but a succession of seas. It is not a civilization, but many civilizations piled one on top of the other. Traveling across the Mediterranean means meeting the Roman world in Lebanon, prehistory in Sardinia, Greek cities in Sicily, the Arab presence in Spain. Along its shores ran the Silk Road and the roads of salt and spices, oil and perfumes, amber and ornaments, crafts and sciences were crossing each other. Innumerable traces of an intricate past lie on the seabed of this immense organism. Many have been discovered, others are still hidden in the sea depths and waiting to be unveiled. The traces of this secular history, which underwater archaeology tries to reconstruct as pieces of a large puzzle, have to be carefully preserved to be passed on intact to the generations to come. The Mediterranean Sea, together with its underwater archaeological heritage and its lusciously rich ecosystem, is an extremely fragile asset, whose precarious balance is constantly threatened by pollution, coastal erosion, overbuilding, climate change, and unsustainable exploitation of marine resources. Bluemed is a project co-financed by Interreg-Med, a program aiming to raise awareness among European citizens and institutions about the need to protect the underwater natural and cultural heritage for the development of sustainable tourism in the coastal areas and islands of the Mediterranean. This large project involves 5 countries and different entities, including university research centers, ministerial bodies, regional institutions, agencies, foundations, marine protected areas, and museums. Bluemed, in accordance with the recommendation of 2001 UNESCO Convention on Underwater Archaeology, tries to promote and protect underwater archaeological heritage in situ, and thus so by promoting activities of documentation, preservation, and underwater restoration. On each site involved in the project, a multidisciplinary team conducted an in-depth study to document its state of preservation, carry out restoration works, and make the site accessible to tourists. The marine biologists of the Oceanography Center of the University of Cyprus have surveyed the invaluable reservoir of biodiversity that thrives in symbiosis with columns, amphorae, and wrecks, while the experts in archaeological diagnosis of the Central Superior Institute for Restoration of Rome have studied the processes of deterioration of the artifacts in order to identify, together with the restorers, the most appropriate methods to prevent and inhibit the effects of bioerosion while protecting the marine ecosystem. Greek, Italian, and Croatian archaeologists have teamed up to define the good practices for the management of underwater archaeological parks, then conducted documentation campaigns on pilot sites to acquire the information needed for a proper dissemination to the public. The engineers of the University of Calabria and the University of Zagreb have created the 3D models of the areas of interest. Professional photographers and archaeologists, in turn, have acquired thousands of photographs needed to reconstruct the shape of archaeological artifacts with a very high level of detail. Marine drones were used to automate the acquisition of the seabed profiles through multi-beam sonars, while the modeling of the coast in proximity of the submerged sites was performed by the means of air drones. By merging all the obtained three-dimensional data together, it was possible to develop a virtual reality system that allows for virtual underwater exploration of a marvelous environment, so that even the visitors who cannot dive may discover the invaluable wonders that lie in the depths of the Mediterranean Sea, admiring the symbiosis that century after century has thrived between the archaeological artifacts and the marine ecosystem. On the other hand, a series of innovative underwater itineraries have been created especially for divers. Special tablets can be used to navigate into archaeological sites and obtain information on artifacts and organisms, so that diving can become an opportunity to learn and understand the marine archaeology and biology of a site. The underwater archaeological areas of Crotone and Baia in Italy, Cavtat in Croatia, Peristera in the Bagasatic Gulf in Greece were the pilot sites chosen by Bluemed to implement new management models and test the best practices for the promotion of underwater archaeological tourism. The pilot sites in Greece are of heterogeneous nature, such as the large wreck of Peristera, dating to the classical period and containing a load of Attic ceramics and thousands of amphorae containing the fine Aegean wines of Scopulus and Mende, still piled up in stowage position. In the charming Pagasatic Gulf, not far from Amaliapolis, several submerged sites have been studied and subjected to interventions. In Glarus, there is a veritable cemetery of shipwrecks, with about 1,000 of ships that sank between the Hellenistic period and the beginning of the 20th century. Between 3 and 11 meters deep, the crystalline waters of the islet of Kikintos hide the remains of a Byzantine wreck that carried large containers for foods of 3 different types, called pitoi, together with amphorae dating from the 11th and the 13th century AD. In Telegraphos, there are the remains of another wreck of the late Roman age. Thanks to the Bluemed project, the Greek Ministry of Culture was able for the first time in its history to create underwater archaeological itineraries and make them accessible for tourists who may visit the area accompanied by authorized personnel. In Cavtat, located near the Croatian islet of Supetar, Bluemed has brought new life to 2 splendid shipwrecks that were going up to the Adriatic shores along well-established trade routes. The first wreck, datable to the early Imperial Age, carried large spherical containers known as dolia, which had a capacity of about 3,000 liters each. The dolia was mostly used for bulk wine, but it could also be used for transporting olive oil or grains. The second wreck is another Roman cargo ship, coming from the coasts of North Africa, that sank at about 30 meters deep between the 3rd and the 4th century AD, while carrying a large load of about 1,200 wine amphorae. In Italy, Bluemed's activities in the Ionian Sea were concentrated in the marine protected area of Capo Rizzuto, not far from the ancient Croton, where it is possible to visit 2 wrecks from the late Roman age that carried hundreds of tons of valuable rare-hewn marbles. These ships were probably directed to some port in the western Mediterranean Sea, and their bulky cargo was to be used to adorn sumptuous public and private buildings. The wreck called Punta Schifo D began its journey on the island of Marmara in Turkey, where it loaded the Proconnesian marble, then stopped on the coasts of Asia Minor to load Dosimium marble, and in the port of Piraeus near Athens to put aboard Pentelic marble, eventually sinking near Punta Schifo. The other wreck, called Galacigala, was carrying marble quarried on the distant island of Thasos in the northern Aegean Sea. The last of the Bluemed sites takes us to the Tyrrhenian Sea to discover the marvelous remains of the submerged city of Baia. Once a popular thermal and seaside destination in Roman times, this city, located in the Gulf of Pozzuoli, was patronized by emperors, senators, and wealthy merchants who built opulent and luxurious buildings, eventually submerged due to the Phlegraean predeceasm. Here, Bluemed has selected a series of splendid complexes, such as the Villa with Praterus entrance and the Villa of the Pisones, complete with fish ponds, thermae, gardens, porticos, and sumptuous halls, which in ancient times were adorned with precious marbles and mosaics. Thanks to the Bluemed project, today it is possible to visit the 2 mosaic floors, which were recently brought to light inside the underwater archaeological park of Baia. A magnificent polychrome tessellation with geometric and floral motifs, and the extraordinary bichrome mosaic which adorned the changing room of a public bath complex, which depicts 2 wrestlers engaging in a fight under the watchful eye of the master referees. The mosaics have been carefully restored by the Superior Institute for Restoration of Rome, and today can be admired by the visitors of the submerged city. In each of these sites, Bluemed promotes the creation of underwater archaeological itineraries and cultural and environmental education centers, aiming to attract the general public and increase the level of awareness of local communities towards their cultural heritage. Bluemed, dive in blue growth.